welcome to the Recovery Daily podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abassi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And I did an act of kindness today. I don't know if you did. So my act of kindness was itsy bitsy teeny tiny. And all I did was I texted somebody so that they would not feel alone. So this person is dealing with a major loss in her life. And when she crossed my mind today, I sent her a text and I said, thinking of you, and sent like a kiss emoji. That's it. That's my act of kindness. That counts. And so I want to show you examples of how these tiny little itsy bitsy things that we do really can make big impacts on other people's lives, especially ones that are going through difficult times. So, speaking of difficult times, I had my appointment with my psychiatrist today, and we talked a lot about we really got to the core of some things that have been bothering me. And one is that since I had my stroke, I have been hyper focused on death and dying. And it's like I had my stroke and then my friend passed away. And, my aunt passed away, and it's like every person that passes away, no matter how close to me they are, whatever circle, if we put the people we love and know into circles around us, no matter whether they're in the first circle, the second, or the third, it triggers me into this thought loop that I can't get out of. So this friend that I texted, whose husband passed away from the disease of alcoholism, he committed suicide. And I have been, there was a night that I didn't sleep. All night I didn't sleep because I just put myself in her shoes. It was like I was playing. It was like I was living her pain. I don't know if I was trying. I don't know what I was trying to do. But I couldn't get out of it. And so I was talking to her, my psychiatrist, about this idea. And I took a ton of notes about it. I'm gonna go off camera here and reach for my notes that I took because it was really enlightening. So I wanted to share. I didn't plan on sharing this with you today, but I think it's important. So we were talking about empathy, and I said, I have a problem with empathy. And so I was explaining to her how I'm like reliving or I'm trying to live the experiences of these people who have lost either a loved one or relive the last moments of the lives of the loved ones that I've lost or the loved ones that they've lost. I just get myself into this obsessive thinking, and whenever it's triggered, so when my friend's husband passed away on Friday, I started reliving my friend's passing from alcoholism. I was reliving my brother-in-law's passing from suicide. I was reliving my aunt's passing from ALS. I put myself in their place and try to imagine their last thoughts and what it was like. It's not healthy. I recognize that it's not healthy. That's why I was talking to the psychiatrist about it. I feel like, so what she said to me was, this empathy, I may, unknowingly be using it to distract me from my own issues, my own problems. And I said, that could very well be. Anything is possible, honestly. But another thing that I was able to finally put into words was, I told her that ever since my stroke, I have been consumed by the insignificance of me. Um, I'm grateful that I did not pass away yet from the disease of alcoholism. I am grateful that the stroke did not kill me. But, and however you want to say it, I am still obsessed with this idea of how insignificant my life actually is in the whole scheme of things. And I'm obsessed with the idea that these folks that pass away are no different than me. I was never suicidal. I've never been suicidal. Of course, I've thought of things that I think every human being thinks, but I've never considered taking my own life. And so this is different than me. But in the way of, like, my friend that passed away from alcoholism, like, we hung out so many times and had the same sense of humor, the same interesting conversations about big concepts in life and stuff like that. And it makes me smile because every conversation with him was hilarious, but which is pretty cool that it makes me smile. But the fact that he's not here now is just mind-boggling to me. So anyway, I was talking to her about all of this stuff, and she was recognizing the fact that, we as human beings just don't have thought patterns that can resolve the idea of death. And this is, that's where lots of people turn to religion, because it allows us to continue to write the story or complete the story. I don't want to go in the direction of religion, but what's important, we talked about, is that I talk about it. So that's really why I called to have a psychiatrist. This is the reason why, because of these thoughts. And I hadn't yet gotten to the core of that. I don't know that I specifically have figured out how to talk about it on the podcast, because I didn't know how to put it to words until today. And she asked me, like, why were you up all night thinking about this man, the husband of this woman? And I said, the same reason why when my neighbor passed away suddenly years ago in 2016, right before I got sober, the same reason why that was that made me hit my rock bottom, because it doesn't matter who it is or what it is. It's a trigger that happens at the wrong time, when I'm already really vulnerable about things, these ideas. Like, when I was reaching my low of active alcoholism, I was already just out of control, drinking 24/7. And all I needed was somebody to just push me over the edge, just tap me, and I was going to fall over the cliff. And that's what happened when my neighbor passed away. And she died of a heart attack, unexpectedly. And she was young, in her, she wasn't much older than me. Maybe 10, I think she was 10 years older than me. And that's all I needed was just this tiny little to push me off of the cliff. And that's how I feel now that my friend's husband passed away from suicide, is that I'm already so wrapped up in this concept of death. And, she had been talking for a couple years now about her husband and his struggle with alcoholism and not being able to get into recovery long term and those kinds of things. And then she shows up to the meeting and says that he passed away. And that's all I needed. All I needed was another example of somebody who's here and then they're gone. I know that'll make sense to somebody out there. So one way that I have found to rein those thoughts in a little bit, that I explained to her, was this idea of shrinking my world. So before I had my stroke, my world was small. I had me and my husband and my kids, and we lived in a house in Charlestown, and I had a job, and I took this road to work and back, and I know the world, news and all of this stuff. But my obsessive thinking, my focus, my world that I lived in day to day was this big. And I needed to be this big or I get overwhelmed. There are some people, like our leaders of the world, who look at the world as large as it is, and they are able to deal with that mindset, with that large concept, And then there's people like Stephen Hawking who looked at the world as larger than Earth. He looked at it as this infinite space. And some of us, like me, when we try to expand our minds to be the size of space, it's overwhelming. And when I had my stroke, my mind expanded to be larger than my world. It became life and death. It became the existence of human beings. And as much as I've thought about it over my lifetime, and as a child, I remember having panic attacks, thinking about death, thinking about, knowing the idea that one day I'm not going to be here. And that was just like, I can't even tell you, I would have panic attacks. It took my breath away. And I've even had my kids mention this same idea to me, that they have struggled with this same concept. And I've been able to rein it in for myself and focus on the world around me. But like I mentioned, the stroke changed that for me. And I've really had a hard time pulling myself back in and just being a mom and being focused on my well-being and being a pet owner and being a wife and a daughter and a sister. So I'm working on that. And one of the things that my psychiatrist said was to try reframing my thoughts for rather than preparing for the worst, which is what we all do as humans, prepare for the best. So I kind of laughed when she said this because it's not a new concept to me. But when I was thinking about myself standing in my kitchen and having, this is what happened, okay? This is the honest truth. I was in my kitchen and I was putting away the dishes. And I have this, I don't know what it's called, what my husband calls it. He calls it a spider, I think, or something. Anyway, it's like a handle and like a strainer thing so that I can, like, when I bake, when I boil my bagels, I pull them out of the boiling water with this spider thing, this spider web thing. Anyway, it's metal. So that was totally unnecessary for me to explain that whole thing about what that thing is. Okay, so I'm in the kitchen, I'm doing the dishes, and I drop that utensil on the floor. This is what happens in my mind. My aunt died of ALS. What if that's the sign that I have ALS? I know that's not crazy. It's not crazy to think that, but it's unnecessary for me to go all the way from dropping a utensil on the floor to I may have early onset ALS. You know, what in the world is that going to do for me if I think like that? But what my psychiatrist said, I gave that as an example to her as a real thought that I really thought like 2 weeks ago. And I thought it and then I just blew it off. It wasn't like I seriously was starting to panic like I have ALS, but it was a thought. It was an unnecessary thought. Anyway, she said, next time you drop your utensil, think, what if I don't have ALS? What if I never have ALS? So, like, say the opposite to myself, because what I didn't do is reframe that thought after I thought it. I just thought it and then I was like, that's ridiculous. And I moved on and put the dishes away. But I really need to spend a little more time reframing these ideas because that's not the only time I've thought that. So clearly, this is on my mind. And the reason why it's on my mind is because it seems to me like whatever happens in my family, health wise, gets passed down to me. Whatever it is, whether it's a stroke, whether it's alcoholism, and, like my grandmother, not my grandmother who had a stroke, but my mother's mother had breast cancer, and my mother had breast cancer. So I'm like certain that I'm going to have breast cancer. And what I need to do is say, what if I don't have breast cancer? What if I never have breast cancer? I haven't done that. I've never thought that. I've never thought, what if I don't? I've only ever thought, what if I'm going to? Um, because the odds are that I'm going to, but what if I don't? You know? Um, and she also talked about, instead of thinking, because I talked about what happens, I realized the insignificance of me and how I can die at any time, right? I know that's always been true, but now I'm just focused on it. And she said, instead, focus on what if you don't die tomorrow? Like, put some plans together. What can you look forward to? Instead of continuously thinking about what if I'm gone, think about what if I stay? What if I'm here? So, what we kind of ended with was, I said I want to get old, so I need to focus on what if I do? What if I do get old? And I like that. It was a good conversation. And it also made me think about, the best thing happened for in my situation, for my alcoholism. The best came out of that, meaning it didn't take my life. Um, and the best happened from my stroke because it didn't take my life either. So when I didn't even have the wherewithal in both situations when I was at my worst, when I was having the stroke or when I was in detox or just getting ready to go into detox. I didn't have the wherewithal to think, what if I die from this? All I can do now is think back and be grateful that I didn't. But I think my point is that I need to look at my experiences that I have ahead of me and think, just like a psychiatrist or my addiction therapist told me in the first 2 years after I got sober, she said, have you ever imagined the best case scenario? And I was like, well, no. Why would I do that? Because we always think of the worst. So, my psychiatrist today also talked about focusing on the difference between my emotions and empathy. And it's my emotions that I need to process. My empathy can't be so great that I begin processing other people's emotions. That's not what empathy is for. So that was a really interesting conversation today, and it is not the direction that I intended to go in for the podcast, but that's okay. I love when that happens. What I wanted to talk about today is the phrase first things first in sobriety, and I think it goes in line with everything, really, this idea of first things first. It's a principle in my sobriety program that really resonates with folks in recovering from alcoholism, but it can also be applied to individuals in stroke and vestibular recovery. So I just wanted to talk about how folks that are in recovery from other health concerns can use this phrase. So I call these phrases in sobriety, I call them boomerang phrases, because no matter where my mind has shot off to, just like I was just talking about, no matter where my mind is, a phrase like first things first reminds me of my priorities, and it pulls me right back to where I need to be. Pulls me back to where I am. And where pulls my mind back to where my body is. And that's why I call it a boomerang phrase. So it reminds me of my priorities and helps me to navigate the daily choices that I'm facing when I'm living with my health and my well-being being my full-time job. Today, every day, I'll get to a place where I've got to grab a thought that I can almost see it spiraling out of control, and I have to grab it before it goes too far and pull it back, that boomerang. And first things first helps me do that. There's lots of other phrases as well in sobriety. that are just like this, but I just want to cover first things first today. So, sobriety and survival is my non negotiable number one priority in life. And life without sobriety and focusing on survival, without that, I'm dead, without a doubt. One drink is going to lead me to my death. I'm sure of this. And for a recovering alcoholic, first things first represents this idea of abstaining from alcohol is number one. First things first. It's non-negotiable. Survival is recognizing that alcoholism is a life-threatening disease and understanding that the treatment of my alcoholism needs to be first in my life. And this means, number one, don't pick up a drink no matter what. And I'll talk a little bit more about what is first things first? Like, what is my treatment? What do I put first in sobriety? And what do I put first in stroke and vestibular recovery? So, in the broader sense of recovery, this mantra, first things first, really just underscores the importance of prioritizing our health above everything else, because without it, everything else in my life will fail. So it's pretty seamless as I've thought through it, how first things first also applies. And in the context of stroke and vestibular recovery, it translates to doing our therapy, even when we don't feel like it, getting up and moving the limbs that we need to move, even when we don't feel like it, even when it hurts. For me, it's not my limbs that I'm moving, it's my eyes that I have to move. And even when it hurts, I have to do it to a certain point, right? Where we have professionals in our lives that help us know how far to go, and when to stop and rest. So, first things first to me in stroke and vestibular recovery is adhering to my rehabilitation exercises, attending my therapy sessions, and rest. Lots and lots of rest. Rest to the point where it gets annoying. Some days it gets annoying. Today was kind of one of them. I don't know. I just wasn't in the mood for resting, but I had to, because I went to all those, you're going to laugh. I went to all those support groups yesterday, and so my head was killing me today, right? I mean, I went overboard, but I really wanted to go. And I think that what I didn't do right is I should have signed on and then not looked at the computer anymore. Sign on using voiceover. And this thing about voiceover, I've been trying to have this as a goal to move over to voiceover. And I'm telling you, there's a reason why I haven't brought it up, because I still have not done it. I still am slowly working towards it, but I keep putting it off. I keep thinking, well, should I really move over 100% because I'll probably get better? My therapist is probably going to tell me to start slowly introducing myself to my computer again. So I'm like, Why waste my time? It's bad. It's bad, but it's okay because I laugh at myself. It's fine. So I came clean. No, I'm still not 100% on voiceover on my computer. In fact, I haven't been doing voiceover on my computer at all. The only thing I've been doing is I have this. I don't know if you'll be able to see this because it's not in color. This one's kind of in color. You might be able to see it. But I'm making this keyboard and it has voiceover hints on it. And I'm doing it so that when you want to learn voiceover, there's these sheets that are just pages and pages of words, and I can't read those. It hurts my head. So I'm translating all of them over to a diagram. You know what it reminds me of for those of you who are in AA? It reminds me of when it's time to do step 4 and all you got to do is pick up a pen and you don't do it. And people throw pens at you because they're trying to stress to you the importance of doing your step 4 and you keep not doing it and putting it off. That's what I'm doing. This is me throwing pens at myself and trying to do other things other than just turning voiceover on and practicing. So I went on a tangent, but I'm just saying, this is why my head hurts today. So first things first, today was I had to rest because of putting myself through the support groups. I could almost hear my psychiatrist just nodding her head and being like, you can't just go to one support group. You have to go to 4 support groups in one day. And I'm like, I wanted to go to all of them. So, okay. So just like the importance of not drinking for an alcoholic, those recovering from a stroke or dealing with vestibular issues, engaging in the prescribed recovery activities is vital for survival and improvement. So in recovery, my medicine is to go to AA. First things first, I have to go to AA. And coincidentally, first things first, it's the first thing I do in the morning is go to AA. Well, I let my dogs out so they can go poo-poo. But other than that, I go to AA. And it is non-negotiable. I go, even if I oversleep, which has been happening a bit over the past couple weeks. And that's understandable because I'm also going through vestibular therapy and exercises, and I'm prioritizing those. So, just like AA is my medicine for my alcoholism, for any chronic disorder, illness, or pain, we have to take that medicine, and that medicine is non-negotiable. And that medicine can look like all different things. For me, my medicine is, I've got actually some vitamins that I've started taking that over 3 months is supposed to start improving my head. We'll see. I'm only on, a couple weeks at this point, maybe a month. I'm not sure. So that's number 1. And I have some other, I have anxiety medication, which I'm learning a little bit more about the link between vestibular issues and anxiety. I had no idea there was a link between the two. So figuring that out. My medicine for stroke recovery is also talking about how I feel. And this helps in 2 ways. It helps my language, speech, and memory deficits that are a result of my stroke. And it also helps with my psychotherapy needs, with staying mentally healthy. And my medicine is vestibular therapy twice a week. And then I have my vestibular therapy homework every day. And that's continuing to get to be more and more therapy. So I have a new exercise that I have to do. And I'm practicing reading out of a book. So I get to read 2 paragraphs out of a book every day. And that's kind of exciting because I've been wanting to read books, but it hurts my head. So um, it's pretty self explanatory. I read 2 paragraphs a day, and then after a week, we're going to see if I can increase by a paragraph and see if I can get my head to get used to that this eye movement, because it's about a minute or two before my head starts hurting just from doing this on a page. These are my eyes. Just doing that on the page. Um, so this is first things first. And my husband has been telling me when I seem to stray from my priorities that my recovery is my job. When I feel sad about not having a job, he's like, "You do have a job. Recovery is your job," and and it's important that I remember that first things first. So, um, it's important also to recognize that there's a lot of decisions, a lot of feelings that happen during this time that we're in recovery, whether it's the beginning of sobriety or the beginning of stroke recovery and vestibular therapy. In the early stages, there is just there are so many decisions that have to be made. There's a backlog of neglected tasks due to our illness, due to you know what, like I said, whether it's alcoholism or stroke, things just kind of fall apart in the beginning, and it can be overwhelming. It's also in the beginning, we just happen to be cognitively inhibited, typically. I would almost say every time, in alcoholism and uh, stroke recovery, we have cognitive overload, and that makes it even more difficult to make decisions. And we want to address everything as soon as possible and get back to our lives. So having first things first as this mantra can help to cut through some of that noise, to deal with recovery related decisions first and set that foundation for all other activities. Because if we don't focus on first things first, we none of the other stuff matters, right? And so first things first helps me. When my husband says it helps me take all those things in my head and file them away in the folders that they need to go into, so that I can open up that folder when it's time to get to it. And my first things first looks a little bit like, you know, insurance. I need to make sure that I figure out all of my insurance and the paperwork and stuff. And I need to be able to I need to be flexible enough to rest around the times that I need to do my insurance paperwork, because it hurts my head. My doctor's appointments are at the top of my list. Again, I have to be flexible enough with my days that I put rest around my doctor's appointments. my therapy. And then after these really critical recovery things, then I've got my self-care. Self-care is probably up there at the top, but it's in there, and I guess the self-care is intertwined with the top three. And then I've got my puppies. I've got things in the house to take care of. And then after that are my hobbies, my quilt making and my baking. And sometimes I'm like, I really wanted to finish this quilt that I'm making for a holiday that just passed. And I don't want to give too much away, but I wanted to finish it for a holiday that just passed. And I didn't. And I talked to my husband about it. And I was like, he's like, this is just a lesson to really think about how long one of these things takes or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I'm going to try to finish it by the next upcoming holiday. Again, don't want to say too much. But it doesn't, if I don't finish it, it's okay because that is not my priority. The quilt is not my priority. The priority in my life is recovery. And the quilt is something to help me enjoy recovery. And it's important for me to recognize that. So, um, again, flexibility to fit in rest and naps when I need to. Many people find their lives being just a straight up tornado during active alcoholism or in the early chaotic days of health recovery. And first things first helps to introduce order into your day. And this alone gives me a calming effect. And that's why I have lists all over my house. I have these big mirrors and I use them as whiteboards. And I have a whiteboard in my bedroom. And I use all of these because I need order and I need to see what my priorities are because I forget. I end up thinking that yoga is my priority and it's not. My health and exercise is a priority, but getting on the mat it specifically is not the priority. I can't beat myself up because I don't have time to get on the mat and do yoga for an hour. What I can do is make sure that I get on the mat and stretch, and make sure that I'm taking care of those kinds of needs. I take a walk around the block, that kind of stuff. So, this helps to keep my priorities, establish a realistic and manageable routine that's centered around my therapeutic activities. And I think that first things first, these boomerang phrases that I've been introduced to are really nice to like just stick in your back pocket, figuratively speaking. Just stick it in your pocket, pull it out whenever you feel like that junk in your head is knocking around and you get yourself in an unhealthy thought loop. Whether it's being sad that I had to leave my job when I did, at 49 years old, and this is not how I saw my life, panning out. This is not what I expected to happen. Whether I'm sad about that, if I'm sad because I want to go to the movie theater and why am I going to pay $3,000 to go to the movie theater and get some popcorn when I can't look at the screen? Because I still want to experience it. I still want to sit in a theater. Or being frustrated like today that I can't do anything and I have to sleep all day. When I'm in those kinds of loops, I pull out that boomerang phrase to help pull me right back to where I'm sitting and be like, you know what, it's okay. And it yanks me back into these critical moments where I can rephrase my thoughts, reframe my thoughts, and get me moving towards recovery, slowly moving me towards recovery if I've gone off course. And I sometimes lose the rhythm of my comfortable routine, and these kinds of phrases help pull me back to that. So, wow, I think that was a really long episode. Oh, it was no longer than any other episode, I guess. Anyway, so thanks for listening. It felt good to get all that out. I hope it felt good to listen to it. And thanks for joining me on the Recovery Daily podcast. I will talk to you tomorrow.